Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to yet another very exciting Star Wars video. It is I coming at you once again, the one and only, your favourite galactic hostess, Star Wars Meg. And today we're going to be talking about a pretty big development from Lucasfilm. They've just confirmed the strangest Andor Season 2 crossover. But let me preface it with this. Whenever Lucasfilm releases a new Star Wars show, whether it's well received or it's not, it always feels like an isolated event. With only a couple of exceptions in the Mandoverse, most stories feel very contained. And at times, that's perfectly fine. There is space for those kinds of stories in the Star Wars universe. But even in stories that do connect to the wider saga like Kenobi, Ahsoka, which is going to trigger the New Republic Remnant War, Andor, which connects to Rogue One and A New Hope, there are still elements in those projects, be they characters or planets, which are never seen again. Lucasfilm will introduce brand new species, brand new worlds, brand new characters, and never do more with them. But today, my friends, Lucasfilm just did something very awesome. They took a planet from Andor Season 2 and deepened its significance. I'm talking about the agricultural planet of Mina Rao. Did you know that before The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon, Mace Windu, and Aayla Secura went there? I'm usually not a fan of Lucasfilm making what I call cheap connections like this, but I'm actually very happy about this one. It gives the planet a deeper lore, and changes the way you see it when you go back to rewatch Andor Season 2. As a Star Wars fan, when you become attached to a certain aesthetic, a certain planet, you think about the events that took place there. Because for so many new planets introduced, we don't really have time to develop a relationship with them. They look cool and they just appear one or two times, and then never again, so we forget about them. Ultimately, it comes down to emotional investment through familiarity and narrative weight. When a Star Wars planet is only shown once, it functions like a disposable backdrop. It's there to look pretty, establish a quick mood, or host a short plot beat. We don't get much time to learn about its culture, history, or significance. Without the aforementioned repeated exposure or meaningful events, our brains don't really build a strong mental model of it, so it just feels like another stop, rather than a living place. And I do understand Lucasfilm's motive for doing this. They want to show us how expansive and massive the Star Wars galaxy is. And I'm all for new planets, but I wish they'd take the time to explore the lore behind each of them. The Kenobi show is a great example of this. We have a lot of investment in planets like Alderaan, Tatooine, Mustafar, but if I asked you if you're emotionally attached to Daiyu, you'll probably say no. Even planets they introduced from the expanded universe like Jabim or Mapuso. They were fantastic callbacks, but they didn't do anything with them. No flashbacks, no mention of why they're important, and so I would say they're forgettable. But if you take the time to develop a planet, its citizens, its history, its importance, fans grow attached to it. The best example of this is Navarro from The Mandalorian. It's a mainstay of the series where there was a Mandalorian covert, and it's appeared in every season. And even if planets only appear once or twice, you can make them memorable and significant. If you look at George Lucas' Star Wars, in the main saga movies, Geonosis only appears in Attack of the Clones, but it's so memorable. The Battle of Geonosis, the start of the Clone Wars, the connections to Count Dooku, the Death Star, Poggle the Lesser, and the movie-defining lightsaber fights. Same thing with Kamino. The amount of world building established in one or two scenes was insane. The Sith plot involving Sidious, Tyrannus, the framing of Sifo-Dyas, the origins of the clones, the Kaminoans, Jango Fett, young Boba Fett. In those Kamino scenes, Kamino was not just a planetary backdrop. And by the way guys, that's why the episode of The Bad Batch where Kamino City was destroyed was so emotional and so tragic. Whether it was in Episode 2, The Clone Wars, various video games, as Star Wars fans we grew attached to what it symbolized. And that's the difference between planets like those and Disney's single-use planets, which so often lack layered storytelling. And you know, to be fair, there is something to be said about the movies versus the shows. What the movie has to achieve, the larger plot threads, versus a multi-episode season where there are different side missions, and the stakes can vary depending on the story, its themes. But then again, Andor was a TV show, and it did incredible things with its brand new planets, so it is possible. But what I'm saying is they should use what they've established and go deeper with it. And as you're going to see in just a moment, they're finally starting to do this. With Andor and Ahsoka Season 2, we're about to learn so much about the second galaxy of Peridia. That's so exciting. So Lucasfilm is slowly making those larger connections. And I'm not saying every single planet has to be memorable. Sometimes you need to do a fuel stop, sometimes the main characters have to do side missions, and you're probably not going to remember every single moon or planet, but do more with the ones you've already established, and spend time and money creating. Do cross-media world building, and we know they can do it, They did an amazing job with the Moon of Nur, which has appeared several times. The one I want to see return the most is Atatin, now that they got rid of the grid. The Jewels of the Old Republic was such a fascinating concept, and I'd love to see it come back and be involved in the war against the Remnant. So what I'm getting at is emotional continuity, and with that in mind, today's update, and I know it's taken me a while to get to this point, involves the agricultural world of Mina Rao. So I would excuse Andor for most of these criticisms, because whenever a planet does appear, even if it's just once, it tends to serve a very significant plot point, whether you're talking about Aldani, Chandrila, and in this case, Mina Rao. This planet was first introduced in the opening arc of the second season, the episodes 1 year later, Sagrona Tima, and Harvest. It's where Bix went to after learning that she was pregnant, when she left Cassian a note on Yavin, telling him he needs to prioritize the fight for the rebellion. And in the final episode after Cassian starts his journey towards his death, Bix is still alive, and with their child on that planet. But many decades prior, my friends, we have now learnt the planet was important to the Jedi. The latest issue of the pre-Phantom Menace Jedi Knights comic confirms this. Years and years before Brasso died there was the death of a Jedi Master known as Fondar Etsis. The circumstances of his death on Mina Rao were suspicious, and so an honor guard comprised of Jedi Knights Mace Windu, Qui-Gon Jinn and Aayla Secura was dispatched to recover his remains. They were sent to return him for cremation on Coruscant, but the Jedi don't realize they're walking into a trap. And so even before episode 1, Mina Rao was agricultural, and you might be saying, well no shit, obviously it was. But as we know from recent canon, the landscape of planets can change very fast. In Skeleton Crew, SM-33 referred to Aldani as a sulphurous bog world, when in Andor, just years prior, it was luscious and green. So whether it's natural events, or disasters, or bombarding from the Empire or other forces, ecosystems can change. But in the case of Mina Rao, it's pretty much the same. There are some differences to the population though. There are native Mina Raoans in this comic, and they're run by a magistrate known as Kadiva. The Mina Raoans were supportive of the Jedi, and they wanted to help them in their pursuit, understand what happened to the deceased Jedi Master. Aayla Secura says this: "My understanding is that Master Eltz's assignment to Mina Rao was recent." The magistrate replies, "Yes, he was instrumental in dealing with a group of bandits who'd been stealing our crop." Master Qui-Gon is confused, "And you don't believe the bandits were responsible for Master Eltz's death?" "No, I don't think so, Jedi. I don't see how they could be. He was heroic and successful in driving them off. And if you don't mind me saying, his years were rather advanced." So the magistrate thinks he died of natural causes because of his age. But as we the audience know, Jango Fett is involved at some point. Then we see an interesting moment where Aayla Secura gives a Twi'lek prayer in Twi'leki, but Qui-Gon senses darkness surrounding Master Eltz's remains. I trust my instincts. Master Etzis was murdered. They go to his ship, which is still there. Nothing appears to be disturbed. But Qui-Gon takes a blood sample from Master Etzis. Apparently he was poisoned. Poisoned by a toxin he'd never seen before. Fast-acting and violent in appearance. Are you guys seeing the connections this comic is making? And like I said, we know from the preview that Jango Fett is probably involved. So, I love stories like this. It's rare for the comics to do something so meaningful, but I love that Andor Season 2, which generally doesn't have any Jedi connections, suddenly does. Ones which don't impact the story later on, but certainly give the planet a more emotional weight. What do you guys think?